people brought in from the outside will probably produce some good studies and some good suggestions, but they won't be able to prevail in the face of the resources and decision-making power that lies in the hands of the ministers.
President Cyril Ramaphosa last week delivered his State of the Nation address. He announced a few reforms to the country's economic policy framework. Joining me to discuss these reforms and whether or not they go far enough is John Endres, Director of the CRA, as well as the co-author of our weekly Risk Alert, which goes out to clients every weekday morning at 7 a.m. Link in the description if you'd like to find out more. So, John, what were some of the announcements that Mr. Ramaphosa made last week? And do you think that they're going to move the needle?
Yeah, David, I think we have to give the president credit where credit is due. And he started out his presentation by speaking about the difficult situation the country finds itself in. There were no pretty words, I think, metaphors about plants and regrowth and green shoots and so on. This time he was quite matter of fact and said, we are in a very difficult position as a country. We lost over 2 million jobs during the COVID crisis. Our economy isn't growing and the country is not in a happy space. And of course, also he mentioned the July unrest in South Africa last year in KZN and Gauteng, in which many lives were lost, much infrastructure was destroyed, and much economic disruption was caused. The president then went on to mention fundamental reforms, as you say, he used that expression, which created, I think, high hopes and great expectations on the part of the audience, and went from there into a list of concrete changes in certain areas of the South African economy and society that are very positive. And that includes, for example, some changes in the energy sector, where he described new independent power producing projects coming on stream that should help to alleviate the pressure on Eskom. He spoke about water. He spoke about immigration policy to make it easier for skilled immigrants to enter the country and obtain visas, which is, of course, very often a difficult process. And these kinds of positive changes that the president announced, I think, are to be welcomed. They were also welcomed in the media, in the press, by some opposition parties, because that is something that we've been waiting for a long time. But the interesting bits of the presentation, we think, are really in what the president said towards the end of the speech, as well as what he did not say.
All right, John. Well, what didn't he say? What was lurking beneath the surface of his speech?
Well, there are some really fundamental changes that need to happen in South Africa, which we would call the actual fundamental reforms that the country needs. And that includes, for example, respect for property rights. So the president did state that he was planning to forge ahead with the expropriation bill, which represents a quite fundamental attack on property rights, and which will undermine many of his other efforts to attract investment and to make the economy grow. And it also includes things that he didn't mention, like, for example, the Employment Equity Amendment Bill, which is a tightening up of race-based laws that affect who companies may employ and must employ within South Africa. So there we see no improvement. And we also did not see any fundamental changes in the education system, which is another area of concern in South Africa, because the education system is currently not producing enough graduates with the required skills for a modern economy and a growing economy. And that really is where our concern lies.
Okay, so there were a number of contradictions in the speech. So on the one hand, he's making rhetorical overtures towards the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, saying free trade is important, but then on the other hand, his Department of Trade and Industry and Competition is instituting localization policies. So I think that leads me to the next question, John, which is, does the state actually have the will and the capacity to implement these reforms, even if it does recognize the value of them? And is Mr. Ramaphosa's cabinet on board with some of these changes?
I think, unfortunately, the answer is probably no. One of the sort of small changes that the president announced was the switching off of the analog signal, broadcast signal, and the transition to the digital signal, which is a project that has been going on for many, many years in South Africa. It has been delayed many, many times. The promise is that South African TV viewers will be receiving set-top boxes that will allow them to watch digital TV. But I haven't seen any of those digital set-top boxes in my life. I wonder where they are. And I really do wonder whether the ability to deliver on the promises exists. What we also saw, what I thought was very interesting, is that the president announced That he was bringing on a businessman, as a matter of fact, two businessmen into his private office in order to drive ahead, in the one case, deregulation and removal of red tape to free up business, and in the other case, to pursue the climate transition, the green transition. And what this tells us is that the president is not able to trust his cabinet to deliver, because there is a small business minister who really should be looking at removing and reducing red tape, but it appears that she's not doing so. And similarly, in the energy space, we see that there is an energy minister who should be pushing ahead with the green transition, if that is the cabinet's desire, which it seems to be, but doesn't seem to be delivering as anticipated. So somebody needs to be brought in to drive that. But ultimately, the cabinet really controls resources through the portfolios and departments. And I think, therefore, these people brought in from the outside will probably produce some good studies and some good suggestions, but they won't be able to prevail in the face of the resources and decision-making power that lies in the hands of the ministers. So yes, my feeling is that we're not going to see all of these positive changes being implemented. What is useful is that many of them do have a timeline or a deadline mentioned within the SONA address. So we will actually be able to check whether these things get delivered on or not.
And do you think that looking ahead to 2024, John, that we might be seeing the president trying to position himself almost at an arm's length from his cabinet or other factions of the party in an attempt to perhaps reach out to opposition parties, for example, to try and coalesce around more of a reform agenda? Or do you think he's still very much ideologically beholden to the idea of the ANC?
So I think President Ramaphosa has been the president of party unity. That has been his overriding goal. And I think it will continue to be that. So I'm not really seeing signs of him positioning himself to abandon that objective. I think he will continue to try to hold the party together by whatever means possible. And in many cases, that means that the reforms that the country need won't come to pass.
John Endres, thank you very much. Let's hand over to you, our viewers. Do you think that Mr. Ramaphosa is serious about instituting fundamental economic reform in South Africa? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Also, a quick reminder that we at the CRA have a weekly newsletter where we share a sample of our insights for the week. There's a link in the description below where you can sign up. My name is David Ansara. This is the CRA. Until next time, take care.